Greetings. Um, Wanted to talk to you this morning about something that's kind of been a little concerning to me, just because I noticed the effects of it. Um, at one time or the other in the United States, for those of you that are not aware, we used to have essentially what was known as institutions. Those institutions were mental institutions where essentially people that had severe mental illness, people that were a danger to themselves, danger to the community, were often institutionalized. That means that they were, taken out of the public and oftentimes involuntarily placed in these institutions. Well, um, in the 50s, the 60s, and the early 70s, a movement basically had begun. It's deinstitutionalization. That a lot of these hospitals, like for example, there was a very famous one in Washington D.C. called St. Elizabeth Hospital. It's a big sprawling campus. It's a huge location. They started to shut those down. They started to close those, and in large part because there was, a lot of horrific stories. There is the Willowbrook State School here in the United States, where children were abused and people were abused. And then I think what really kind of brought things to the forefront and accelerated the deinstitutionalization was a movie that came out called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975. And it really illustrated a lot of the abuse that was happening in these institutions. And essentially what happened was, I mean, look, the public and the families, they would institutionalize these people, and it was, hey, sight unseen. Now I don't have to deal with it. They have to deal with it. Well, I understand that the arguments for it, but I also now understand that, you know, those institutions served a particular need. And granted, there was a lot of abuses that came of that. But in hindsight, um, I'm seeing these stories every day where a lady simply coming out of a grocery, unloading groceries in the back of her car, and her 3-year-old is stabbed to death by somebody that has a severe disturbance. An article this morning where they're in Houston um, overnight, two different instances of one person waving people down and people that were stopping to help him, and he ended up stabbing a lady and almost killing her, and he stabbed a guy to death. And then the police ended up having to shoot the guy. And then another lady that was at a home, a homeless shelter and a protection shelter for women, chasing people and hacking people up with a machete. And so, really the problem of the mental health and the issues and placing those in the hands of law enforcement already has enough to do with, researching and investigating the crimes that they already have. And I take the recent, again, I'll allude to Houston. There was uh, what's the word I'm looking for? A scandal there at Houston Police Department because apparently there were 2,500 rapes that essentially were no longer going to be investigated. So the police are already overwhelmed with the crimes that are already happening and the ones that can't be solved. To be able to then say, well, the people that are severely disturbed like this, excuse me, we're going to, have an inability to protect the public. Okay, moving forward. So I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here. I am an attorney. I'm a practicing attorney, former law enforcement, and I've explained before that I really wanted to avoid talking about the law and the intersection of these cases in the law and the way that they intersect with mental health. Now, I'm not talking about mental health law in particular, the process of institutionalizing somebody. I'm talking more about where forensic psychology comes in, and that is okay. What happens, with people, and what are the crimes that are being committed, and things like that. And so I think that we're going to talk a little bit more about that. As I had also disclosed, I teach courses online in a couple of universities, and I have a student who had sent me an issue of a gentleman that has committed armed robbery after armed robbery after armed robbery, and it seems like that the minute that the individual was arrested, they then determined that he's clinically insane, and so he doesn't have the competency to stand trial or to be held responsible. And in one case, it was like 15 minutes after being released, he was committing another armed robbery. Well, you know, at this point, it's not a nuisance because whether the guy has a gun or not is irrelevant. The person who is a victim of that crime believes that he has a gun. That's number one. Then number two, ultimately, what's going to happen is that person is going to end up being shot and killed. Okay, that's ultimately where all of that is going, and it's very preventable. It's very preventable. So I think when we look at these cases as we move forward, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the intersection of mental illness and how they intersect with the courts and how they're intersecting with law enforcement. Because honestly, that's probably not where they need to be. It's probably not where they need to be. But here we are. So thank you very much for listening, and we will see you the next time.